Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of the Rehearsal Season 2, Episode 4, Kissme. Please make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying my reviews of the Rehearsal. It helps in so many ways you have no ideas. Now, we get the genre melody up top of the top 50 singers from the Wings of Voice in the partial recreation of the Houston airport. So we were waiting for a return for those singers, and it did not disappoint. I love they did the different melody of the public domain songs like Amazing Grace, and to see Amazing Grace in a hip hop version was something else. And I love he's saying he's doing it now out of an obligation to the singers. It's also hysterical that they eliminated 40 people in one show out of 50, leaving us with 10. So I don't think we're done with the show, by the way. I think we'll see those final 10 and eventually a winner of Wings of Voice kind of in the background of this show. So that was a really funny open. But you know Nathan's head is somewhere else. He's still on everything with aviation. So he wants to bring in actors now to play the crew members on set of the Wings of Voice to talk to the pilots. He knows they're afraid of getting now in trouble of talking to therapists, what he did with his Sully experiment. And he says, but as I listened in on these private conversations, I noticed one pilot who had hard time talking about stuff. I love he says how he listened in on these private conversations like it's nothing. And of course, the co-pilot he's talking about is Colin, and he notices he has short words on his dating life. So he's always been really leaning into this fact that pilots are not talking to each other before the flight, and this should be a time where they understand each other. So he explores how Colin approaches women, and he wants to do this whole episode to see Colin in that phase of being on a date, pursuing someone in the same way you would first meet the pilot you're going to fly with. And we'll see by the end of this episode that has paid off that concept that Nathan is really leaning into when he's going to prepare this with the big reveal later about Congress, how he's going to prepare a program that is obviously going to be focused on not what goes on in the cockpit, outside of the cockpit, and how important these pilots need to work together before even going to fly. So with his experiment with Colin, he's working on a thing he says it's called the pact. And now this is just something that's visually hysterical right away. He says he saw a nature documentary that animals will hunt in packs because it gives each individual animal the confidence to do things they would be afraid to do on their own. So this is all about getting Colin to be confident to pursue a woman and have the support of people behind him. But these are all actors, and the woman he first is on a date with is an actress. It's all to make these social interactions less scary. This is brilliant. And honestly, I think this is a type of therapy I think would actually work. I think Nathan has a kind of a joke of this, but I do think this is actually pretty smart. It kind of reminds me of this whole episode, seeing him with the pact, and the same concept someone would have of being in group therapy or any support groups, whether it's a help group or even look at AA, things like that. There's a psychology definitely to people being less afraid to do things if there's someone else with them doing the same thing, not feeling alone. I like he points out that the feeling of being on this romantic pursuit with someone you just meet, and same with meeting a pilot for the first time you're going to fly with, is the pressure of sharing the best version of yourself can prevent you from sharing what you actually feel. And I think everyone can relate to that with social anxiety. In general, when you first meet somebody, there is that pressure because you're also reading the person at the same time, but also trying to present your best self. But he notices from the experiment that he still wants to get this more real now, not just an actress that Colin is pursuing. So then he brings the actors aside and asks who's into Colin. So it was funny to also kind of see Nathan operate as a director of the rehearsal to these actors and maybe get a glimpse of what he's really like. We see a 3 women raise hands, and I love how they edited this, where he just says, okay, the rest of you guys can leave. And then he leans into this joke how one of the women is very into Einstein and she's attracted to intelligence. And Nathan encourages them to shoot their shot at Colin. He says, let the games begin, which gets a payoff with Colin later, which we'll get to. But I love when Emma goes to shoot her shot originally, the other woman swoops in and says, you remind me of Einstein. That probably was the hardest laugh of the episode for me. That was great. And I love how we're so used to Nate's Lizard Lounge now that he constantly has these scenes like when he catches up with Colin or Emma just at the bar, like it's his normal bar, but you realize it's just a recreated bar on a recreated set of an airport that was moved there. And you see Nathan is playing matchmaker, but he's like spilling the beans to Colin and Emma. Like he tells Colin, she actually told me she has a bit of a crush on you. And then he says, let the games begin, I guess. So funny how Nathan thinks of these things. He's just this like sneaky guy. So then he gets 5 actors to play Emma and 5 to play Colin. And then he makes 5 apartment replicas of Colin's apartment. It's a predictive tool to allow Colin to have a sneak peek at his own life and the challenges he could face in a relationship with Emma. And one actress explains now in that scenario that she was giving her partner the eye and he wasn't budging. So Nathan asked her to do it a couple of times. And if we know Nathan Fielder and other shows he's been in, he's seeing at this point if he's feeling something while she's giving him the eye. That's why he asked her to do it twice. And I love when he shows Colin then what they've been up to with the replica sets. He's just like, very interesting, like totally freaked out by it. And then Nathan asks him about the first date he had with Emma. And he's like, any kiss action. And now Nathan is doing what the actress was doing to him with the eye, trying to get Colin to notice him, giving him the look. It was so great. And then Nathan has a narration where he says, one great thing about the pact, it can make a co-pilot feel like his struggles are everyone's struggles and that you are not alone in taking on personal challenges. And he has the pact with Colin in the apartment at the same time while he's saying this, and he's not taking the hint of the eye from the actress that's sitting next to him. And now he checks in with Emma, and he's like, has he kissed you yet? And she says she gave him the signal multiple times on the first date and he didn't do anything. And now Nathan's worried because he's like, the pact maybe isn't changing his real world behavior. And I love while he's saying that narration, it's showing Colin playing the Irish folk drum with the pact miming it. And that was the best pact moment. Seeing them do that was so good. I just love how Nathan can just think of so much funny writing in his shows, but also the visuals are just fantastic. And then he says, when I found out where his next date would be with Emma, I was sure to be watching from afar. So this is sneaky Nathan again, watching the second date. And he was highlighting the moment that we all know at the end of a date where you're expecting a kiss and there's no kiss here. And that's when Nathan's like, maybe a man's pact can only get a man so far. And then he goes into this whole other thing where he's like, some of these fake relationships are so far ahead of the real Emma and Colin. And he's like, they bore almost no resemblance. And you see these relationships are making out on the couch. They're deeply in love. So then Nathan says it was the actor's choice of when and how to become intimate. And it shows Nathan watching the actors making out right behind them. It's too good. But Nathan gave the actors beforehand the option to opt out if they were in a relationship. And he shows this actress who says she has a boyfriend and tells Nathan that in love scenes, it's real for her in a minute of that happening on set. Like, she does feel it. Now, Nathan connects it to himself and talks about how he acted in dramatic series The Curse, by the way, which I've reviewed every episode, so check those out. But he's like, I recently acted in a dramatic series that aired on Paramount Plus, a network with some questionable viewpoints, so we know what he's referring to there. But he's like, I mimicked the expressions of a man in love, but didn't feel it all for Emma Stone. So he doesn't understand how an actor can feel real love in a completely fake relationship. He doesn't get this. So this is where it gets really interesting in the concept about acting and intimacy. And he brings in an intimacy coordinator. And he, of course, tells her that the actress they're watching making out with the guy has a boyfriend while they smooch. And the coordinator is even like, it's weird, isn't it? But she's like, but it's one of those things actors get to do. And then Nathan goes so far to invite his significant others to watch, which was so great. And just how he awkwardly has one of the boyfriends next to him. He's like, you cool with all this, while they're watching his girlfriend deeply make out with another actor? And he's like, yeah, I mean, she's an actress. But one boyfriend seems like a little uncomfortable at first, but he's saying how like he can separate and look at his characters there. But I think Nathan's trying to also highlight a point of a little bit of like a stretch of that people kind of take advantage of that. Like that actress who was saying it's only like a minute, but you see how much she's on the couch there with that guy, and how much is that for the character, and how much is it for just personal enjoyment for actors in general in a scene like that. So I think Nathan's kind of pointing out that, and it's maybe can be a little more analyzed in how that goes, but I think it's very interesting. And he says that the concept of acting itself disarmed everyone in their presence, and the actor gets a free pass for virtually any behavior. So Nathan will connect this back to the pilots because he's like, maybe acting can get pilots to do what they're most afraid of doing. So he gives Colin a scene to do, and he says he's Captain Powers. Every date he goes on has no problem asking for a kiss and doing it. And he says to him, Emma will play Jennifer Kissme. So he's making the most obvious situation for a scene for them to actually do what Nathan wants them to do. And it's interesting because it is something psychology that has been proven that like you can look at a famous actress or actor or character in a movie and people learn from that. They see how they behave and act on that. And you can actually definitely use acting as a device to grow and do things maybe you were afraid of doing, because that's what the part requires. So if you were to play, let's say you're a shy person, you were to play a confident character, you got to be confident, right? So maybe tapping into that in your everyday to be a confident person, like fake it till you make it kind of thing, or fake it till it becomes real is kind of where this is going. So it's going to be interesting to see how he would implement this into a program he pitches to Congress. But you see that Colin's on this awkward hangout with Emma at fake apartment. And then he finally says, "Can I kiss you?" And it's just a peck. You're just like, oh, poor Colin. But Nathan's still taking it as a win, right? He got him to do this big step. And he's like, maybe we all need an excuse to be our true selves. And we are just looking for permission. So going to, again, the actors on set and how far they're going with even their significant others there, that it's just having the reason to do it. That's something they probably have urges for anyway. And we're just all looking for permission. So again, going to the psychology of how it gets Colin to do something he really wanted, but having the permission of it being a scene and acting gets it done. So he's like, if this allowed a co-pilot to act on how they really feel, maybe I was onto something. So that's really the crux of the episode and what Nathan has learned here in all his tests. So he brings back the aviation safety expert, John, now tells him the truth, which he didn't originally tell him, that it wasn't all just about aviation safety, that part of his deal with HBO is he's still got to make it entertainment. And you see John doesn't even care at all, so that was great. But he has a set of a Congress chamber here, and you see how he's pointing out to John on the iPad. It's all about the relationship from the start, and that's when John's like, it's all about looking outside the cockpit. So he agrees with Nathan saying, and Nathan leaning into that would prevent the friction when the emergency in the cockpit actually happens. So this is pure genius here, and I said from that first episode, like the way Nathan angled the first episode with him ending and talking about can a clown do something serious, that he's going for this fully. And I think by the end of this, if he doesn't get the change made, he's actually really attempting with Congress to get a change made, and that we're going to see that happen, which I think is going to be really cool and admirable. So we get to see Nathan's getting ready to rehearse now in front of all these actors of Congress. So that gets you hyped. It's a nice cliffhanger for next week. I'm going to give this episode a 9. It stops the streak of all 10 so far. I do think it was just a little bit of a step down. It was a little more all over the place. It wasn't as tight as the other 3, but that's not saying much because it still was genius and great. And I thought was still as funny as most of what we've seen Nathan do before. But again, it kind of brought down the show a little bit to earth, where I feel like it's been flying high and like amazing for the past 3 episodes, where I don't know how you were going to top last week. So it had to come down a little bit naturally. I felt like this was expected, but still so good and really works in going in the story of how he's going to pitch this to Congress and how it's really leaning into the concept of what happens outside of the cockpit with the pilots. So really enjoyed it. I want to hear what you guys think. There's only 2 episodes left, so it's going to be exciting to see how he goes and finishes this and lands the plane. So let me know what you thought. I read every comment, try to respond as many as I can. Hit that sub button so you don't miss one of my reviews of The Rehearsal. I'm also doing The Handmaid's Tale, and I'll be doing other shows and movies as well, and celebrity interviews. And I'll see you next time.